7 signs you've been appointed as a dark chosen one of the new earth. What if everything you thought was a curse in your life, your deepest pain, your isolation, your inner chaos was actually a divine appointment? What if the darkness you've walked through wasn't punishment but preparation? I'm not talking about generic life lessons or motivational fluff. I'm talking about something ancient, something cosmic, something sacred. You see, there is a role that very few are chosen for. It's not glamorous. It's not widely understood. In fact, most people who were chosen for it never even knew it was a thing until it started happening to them. They don't wear robes. They don't sit on thrones. They walk among the broken. They carry scars that don't fade. They're called the dark chosen ones of the new earth. And if you're still watching this, you might be one of them. The first sign is this: you were born into chaos not by accident, but by design. From your earliest memories, something always felt off. Maybe your family was dysfunctional, or maybe it was just emotionally absent. Either way, you were forced to become aware before you were ready. You learned to scan the room like a psychic radar, reading energy long before you had language. That wasn't just trauma. That was initiation. The universe began training you the moment you took your first breath. Why? Because only those who have seen the underbelly of humanity can carry the medicine to heal it. You weren't born into darkness to suffer. You were born into it to understand it from the inside out. The second sign: you never fit in. Not really. Not in school, not in your friend groups, maybe not even in your spiritual communities now. You could imitate normality. Sure, you could smile, nod, play the game, but underneath it all, there was always this sense that you were different. Not better, just other. And that otherness wasn't a flaw. It was a frequency, a signal from the universe marking you as someone who could not be fully absorbed into the matrix. Because to be fully accepted by a sick society is not a sign of sanity. It's a sign of programming. And you were always too awake for that, even when you didn't have words for it.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The third sign is that your breakdowns weren't just emotional, they were spiritual earthquakes. They didn't just shake your world. They shattered your identity, your beliefs, your entire sense of self. And yet, somehow you emerged, not as the same person, but as someone stripped bare, someone closer to truth. That's not a coincidence. That's a symptom of your soul contract. Dark chosen ones are not refined in temples. They are forged in fire. They're brought to the edge not to fall, but to remember who they are when everything else is gone. And if that's happened to you more than once, if you felt like life keeps breaking you, understand this. It's not breaking you. It's sculpting you. Now let me ask you something personal. Something that might pierce through your logical mind and go straight into your bones. Have you ever felt like you were being watched, not in a creepy way, but in a cosmic way? Like something bigger was observing your life, waiting for the moment you'd wake up to what you really are? Because that's the fourth sign. That eerie sense that your life is being guided, not gently, but forcefully. Like your free will only goes so far before you're rerouted, redirected, even wrecked all so you can be realigned with something deeper. That's what happens when you're a dark chosen one. The universe doesn't ask you gently. It drags you. It strips you. It insists that you remember. Why? Because the mission is too important. The role too rare. You don't just carry light, you carry the blueprint of transmutation. You are the bridge between suffering and awakening. And bridges are not made of soft things. They are made of stone, steel, and soul. The fifth sign is your relationship with shadow. Unlike many spiritual seekers who chase the light and avoid discomfort, you've always been drawn to the uncomfortable. You don't flinch at pain. You don't look away from suffering. In fact, a part of you has always been magnetized by it, not because you're broken, but because you recognize it. You understand the language of grief, of rage, of silence. You understand what it means to collapse and rebuild. And that understanding is sacred. Because in the new earth, healing won't come from those who float above the pain. It will come from those who walk through it, who sit with it, who become the space for others to finally feel what they've been avoiding their whole lives. The sixth sign, you become a mirror that people either love or fear. You've noticed it how people project onto you. Some are drawn to you like moths to flame, desperate for your presence, your words, your energy. Others avoid you completely, triggered by your very existence. That's not about you. That's about your frequency. When you've integrated as much darkness as you have, your energy becomes honest. And honesty is rare. It disrupts illusions. It breaks masks. It activates people's stuff. And so you find yourself both admired and misunderstood. But that's part of your role too, to be the uncomfortable mirror that shows others what they've buried. And finally, the seventh sign, your life keeps pointing you towards service, but not the kind of service that's performative or pretty. You're being called to hold space for the unholdable, to walk with those who are drowning, to speak truth where silence has reigned, to bring love into places that no one else is willing to go. That's what it means to be a dark chosen one. You don't just bring light. You become the light in the place that forgot light ever existed. So now the question is no longer, am I one of them? The question is, what am I going to do with this knowing? Because once the signs are seen, once the calling is felt, there is no going back. The mark of the abyss, why the universe trusts those who've been broken open. There's a reason the universe doesn't place its most sacred tasks into the hands of the comfortable. It doesn't assign cosmic responsibility to those who've never been undone. It looks for those who have been cracked open in such a way that they can no longer pretend. And if that's happened to you, if you've fallen apart so completely that you forgot who you were, you need to understand something profound. You were not being punished. You were being initiated. Dark chosen ones are marked not by crowns or titles, but by collapse. By the moment everything they thought was true disintegrates. The moment the job, the marriage, the belief system, the identity, the ego, all of it burns. And in the ashes, something ancient stirs. Not a new personality, not a new version of you, but the original you. The one that existed before the trauma, before the programming, before the world taught you to forget. That's why the abyss isn't your enemy. It's your altar. It's the sacred place where the false self dies and the indestructible self is born. Most people fear that kind of death. They avoid it. They numb themselves with distractions, with consumption, with performance. But not you. You didn't run. Or maybe you tried to, but it didn't work. The abyss swallowed you anyway. And that's how the universe knew this one is ready. Not because you were fearless, but because you stayed. You survived what should have broken you. And in doing so, you became a vessel for something far beyond personal healing. You became a channel for collective transformation. But let's be real, the mark of the abyss doesn't come with applause. It comes with loneliness. It comes with the loss of relationships that no longer match your frequency. It comes with moments where you wake up in tears and don't know why. It comes with feeling too much, sensing too deeply, hearing what others pretend not to say. And yet, that sensitivity, that raw, exposed nervous system isn't a weakness. It's a radar, a spiritual interface that allows you to read the undercurrents of reality, to detect what lies beneath the surface of smiles and small talk. Have you noticed how people confess things to you without knowing why? How strangers tell you their trauma stories within minutes of meeting you. That's not random. That's resonance. They feel your abyss. They recognize your depth. Even if they can't name it, they know you've been somewhere they haven't dared to go. And for a moment, they feel safe enough to be real. That's not a coincidence. That's your field. That's the mark you carry. It's invisible, but undeniable. You were not chosen to escape the world. You were chosen to enter it fully, with eyes that see what others avoid, with a heart that doesn't shut down when things get heavy. You were chosen to work in the places others call cursed, to love the people others call unlovable, to bring divinity into spaces that have been forgotten by the light. And that work that's sacred, gritty, unglamorous work is why the universe trusts you. Because you don't need perfection to offer love. You don't need purity to be a healer. You just need presence. And you've earned that by staying in your own fire long enough to become fire yourself. But here's the twist. The abyss doesn't just mark you. It opens you. It stretches your capacity to hold space for others in ways you never could before. When you've cried on your bathroom floor at 3 a.m., wondering if life is even worth it, and then stood up the next day and helped someone else through their storm, that's not just resilience. That's spiritual authority. That's the kind of strength that doesn't need to be loud. It radiates. It transmits. And people feel it, even if they don't understand it. So I'll ask you something that most people never consider. What if your suffering was never just about you? What if it was the training ground for a mission that's only now beginning to make sense? Because when you've been broken open by the abyss, you don't just gain wisdom, you gain access. You begin to understand the hidden architecture of pain, the sacred rhythm of destruction and rebirth. And that understanding makes you dangerous to illusions, to systems built on fear, to energies that feed on unconsciousness. You become a lighthouse in the storm, not because you're trying to save everyone, but because your very presence says, this too can be survived. You've been marked, yes, but not for suffering, for service, not for punishment, for purpose. Because the new earth isn't being built by those who've never fallen. It's being built by those who fell hard and got back up with their soul intact. The sacred burden, why your pain was never just yours. There comes a moment on this path when you realize something so heavy, so staggering, that it almost knocks the breath out of your lungs, not because it's tragic, but because it's true. That realization is this: your pain was never just yours. It was never simply a random sequence of unfortunate events. It wasn't just bad luck or karma or coincidence. It was ancestral. It was collective. It was cosmic. You were chosen to carry a portion of humanity's unconscious suffering, not because you deserved it, but because you were strong enough to hold it, transmute it, and free others through it. This is the sacred burden of the dark chosen one. You are not just healing your inner child. You are healing the unloved children of an entire bloodline. You are not just confronting your trauma. You are confronting the patterns that have cycled through generations, unspoken, unseen, unhealed. You are not just feeling for yourself. You are feeling for the ones who couldn't, for the ones who numbed, for the ones who died with their truth still locked inside their throat. And that's why your journey has been so intense. That's why your breakdowns have been so complete. The weight you carry isn't just the weight of your own life, it's the weight of many lives. And yet, despite the heaviness, there's a strange kind of clarity that begins to emerge. You start seeing how your pain has always been a map, a portal, a sacred key. Every anxiety attack, every betrayal, every sleepless night surrounded by shadows was actually a call to remember. To remember that what you feel is not weakness, it's capacity, it's spiritual bandwidth. The more you've been able to feel, the more you've been able to hold, and the more you can now release. But here's the part that most people never talk about. Carrying this level of pain and awakening doesn't just make you wise. It makes you isolated. You start noticing how few people can actually meet you where you are. How most conversations feel shallow. How most spiritual teachings feel too sanitized, too light, too disconnected from the raw, bleeding truth of what it means to awaken through darkness. And that loneliness, that's part of the burden too. Because the deeper you go into this work, the more your soul begins to crave authentic resonance. Not followers, not fans, not approval. Just realness, just presence. Just someone who can sit in the silence with you and not flinch. This is the silent suffering of the awakened ones. We become medicine for others, yet often feel like there's no medicine for us. And yet, even in that, there is purpose. Because in the absence of external comfort, you're forced to become your own source of light. And that light doesn't flicker. It doesn't depend on validation. It burns from within. It's born from the ashes of everything you've lost, and it cannot be faked. So let me ask you something that might shift everything. What if every single person who hurt you was unknowingly playing a sacred role in activating this deeper version of you? What if the pain they caused wasn't random but precise? What if your soul chose them not to punish you but to awaken you? That's not spiritual bypassing. That's spiritual mastery. Seeing the divine choreography even in your wounds. Not condoning what happened, but reclaiming your power from it. Because once you realize your pain was never just yours, you stop asking, why me? And you start asking, what now? What am I meant to do with this inner space that used to be filled with suffering? What can I create now that I've survived the fire? What can I offer now that I've learned to breathe underwater? You see, the sacred burden eventually becomes your sacred offering. The same nervous system that once trembled under the weight of other people's projections becomes a compass for truth. You begin to feel the lies in the room before a word is even spoken. You begin to sense the unspoken grief of a stranger and offer them a kind of presence they didn't even know they needed. You begin to heal by existing, not because you're trying to, but because your frequency has changed. You've become a prism for divine presence, and people feel it. They don't always know what to call it, but they feel safe near you. They feel seen, not judged, not fixed, just held. That's the gift of carrying the sacred burden. It's not about saving the world. It's about becoming the kind of person the world remembers how to feel around. The kind of person that reminds others that pain doesn't have to be the end of the story. That darkness is not a death sentence, it's a womb. And from that womb, something holy is born. And so, when you feel tired, when you feel like you're carrying too much, remember, you're not just carrying it, you're changing it. You're metabolizing generations of pain into presence. You're turning lead into gold. Not in a fairy tale way, in a sweaty, trembling, sobbing on the floor and still rising kind of way. And that's what makes you chosen. The final test, what happens when you stop running from your power. There is a moment in every dark chosen one's journey that changes everything. It doesn't come with angels singing or fireworks in the sky. It's quiet. It's internal. It's terrifying. And it's this, the moment you stop running from your power. Because here's the truth, no one tells you darkness was never your enemy. It was your initiation. And power, real power, that's what it was leading you to all along. But not the kind of power the world worships. Not domination, not ego, not control. I'm talking about the power that comes from wholeness. The power that comes from remembering who you are when nothing is left to prove. The kind of power that can sit in absolute stillness and change the room without saying a word. This is the final test. And it's not a test the universe gives you. It's a test you give yourself. It's the decision to no longer shrink to make others comfortable, to no longer apologize for your intensity, To no longer pretend you're just like everyone else when you know you're not. It's the moment you stop fearing your own light, not because it makes you better than others, but because it makes you more responsible. Because you finally understand your power is not for you, it's for us. It's for the collective. It's for the healing of the earth. It's for the children who have yet to be born into a world shaped by consciousness instead of fear. And yet, stepping into that power, it's terrifying. Not because you're afraid of what you'll do with it, but because you're afraid of who you'll have to leave behind. You're afraid of what you'll no longer be able to tolerate. You're afraid of how radically everything might change once you stop pretending. And you're right to be afraid. Because once you say yes to your power, you can't go back to sleep. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you now know. The life you used to live, the roles you used to play, they no longer fit. And that grief, that shedding, that's part of the price. But it's also the passage. Because when you stop running from your power, the world begins to rearrange itself around your frequency. People fall away. Truths rise up. Opportunities appear that align with your soul's blueprint. And most importantly, you stop settling for fragments. You stop searching for validation in places that can't understand your depth. You stop begging to be seen because you see yourself clearly, fully, fiercely. So let me ask you, right now, with everything you've survived, everything you've witnessed, everything you've become, what would your life look like if you stopped hiding? What would you create if your power wasn't a secret, but a sacred offering? Who would you be if you stopped asking for permission to exist? This is not a hypothetical question. This is the moment. Because the new earth isn't coming, it's here. And it's not being built by politicians or celebrities. It's being built by us, by the ones who walked through darkness and didn't lose their compassion, by the ones who cried through the night and still held space for others in the morning, by the ones who carried both the wound and the wisdom. That's what makes you chosen, not your perfection, but your presence. And now, the choice is yours. Not to be chosen, you already are. The choice is whether to accept it, to stop waiting for some external sign, some final confirmation. This is it. Your life is the sign. Your scars are the sacred script. Your intuition is the instruction. So rise, not because you're ready, but because you've been prepared. Rise not to fight, but to build. Not to dominate, but to heal. Not to shine above others, but to light the path for those still lost in the dark. You don't need to know every step. You just need to take the first one, bravely, wildly, unapologetically. Because this is what happens when a dark chosen one stops running from their power. The world begins to remember its own. And everything changes. Forever.